tonight I'm going to talk about some stuff I've never spoken about before or written about before. And I think you should be quite pleased about what you're going to hear. It's the result of many years of work. I've been working on the Carnac alignments for about 30 years. And bit by bit, from things I've understood through the Carnac alignments, I've been able to adapt that to other sites. I've done work on the ziggurats in Mesopotamia and also on the Egyptian pyramids. And tonight, what I'm going to do is show you how exactly the same principles that are behind the Carnac alignments were used to set up the pyramids in Egypt. And not just the Giza pyramids, but the pyramids of Saqqara and the pyramids even much further south. And I'll show how they're all related in a very, very precise plan. So I'm going to start with Carnac. Do you know Carnac? This is the Menec Alignments. This is the first bit. This is where all the tourists arrive. This is the first bit of the Carnac alignments. The Carnac alignments are about 4 kilometers long. There are 11 rows at this part. The biggest stones are at the top of the hill. All of the alignments go slightly down slopes like this with the big stones at the top. And then as they go down the hill, the stones get smaller. There are a little over 3,000 stones still remaining in the Carnac alignments. And altogether, in this area, it's estimated that at the beginning there were about 50,000 standing stones in the Carnac area. So 50,000. So what we see today is a small sort of part of what was a much, much bigger thing. We're talking about 7,000 years ago. The megalithic thing started about 7,000 years ago. So it's much older than the official date for the pyramids. So just let's see where we are in case you've forgotten. That's the south of England and Brittany. And here we are in southern Brittany, in this part. This is called the Quiberon Bay, and here we have the Morbihan Gulf with the Gavrinis. And all these yellow lines are the alignments, different alignments of stones. The Carnac alignments are most well known, but there are very big alignments in Erdeven, Sainte-Barbe, here as well in Quiberon. So it's a very very highly densely populated megalithic area. So we're going to be looking now just at the Carnac alignments to start off with. And these Carnac alignments have always been sort of classified into 3 bits. The bit towards the part towards the west is called Le Menec. And there's a western part and an eastern part, because there's a slight change in direction. Then there's a central part, which is called Kermario, and then this part up here to the northeast, called Kerlescan and the Petit Menec. So that's the whole thing, about 4 kilometers in these Carnac alignments. We're going to look at the first part, Le Menec. This is the satellite photograph of Le Menec. There's a cromlech, an egg-shaped ring at the beginning. And then these lines go along like this. So there's a first direction which comes from the most westerly part and goes towards the east. And from the eastern bit here, there's a different direction which comes back, and they sort of meet in the middle. It gets a bit confused in the center, and I'll show you a bit more detail about that. But there are 2 different directions in these alignments. The Menec East alignments are the only alignments that start on the high ground towards the east and go towards the west. All the others go in the other direction. These are the Kermario alignments. Now there are 2 directions here, a sort of main direction given by the central lines, and then the most southerly line has a slightly different direction, but they both meet up on one big stone here. I'll show you this a bit later. This is a photograph taken at summer solstice sunrise at Kermario. This shows the most southern alignment of Kermario, which is exactly orientated towards the summer solstice sunrise. And of course, if you look in the other direction, then you get winter solstice sunset. If you get summer solstice sunrise along one side of the line, and looking back down the line at winter solstice, the sun sets down that line in that direction. Here we are, the Kermario alignments, very big stones. Here there are 10 rows of stones. And there's a dolmen here, which is on the plateau. At the head of all the alignments, there's a sort of plateau, and then the stones go a bit downhill, and all around, the land goes down all around that plateau. And then the final part, the Kerlescan, le Menec. Now these lines are not parallel, these are different. They converge towards a point, so they're sort of V-shaped. They converge towards a point here, which is in someone's garden. I won't be going into the details of that this evening, but it's very interesting. And then they go here to a certain point, and then there's a line of stones going through the woods here, which is open all year round. Well, this is not fenced off. The other parts of the alignments are fenced off over the summer. You have to pay to get in and do the guided visits. But these alignments are open all year round. They're not actually in the town of Carnac. These lines are actually at La Trinité. Right. But they're part of the Carnac alignments. Yeah. Here's a plan of that part of those alignments. These are Professor Tom's plans, which I have actually sort of pieced together and placed over the satellite. Professor Tom did separate plans for this massive stone cromlech here, this stone arc of a circle here. This is 220 meters across. It's still there in the woods. Nobody knows about it.
So when was it done?
These plans were made by Professor Tom in the 1970s. There were other plans made before by the Germans and stuff, but during the Second World War, the Germans made detailed plans of the Carnac alignments, but they weren't as good as Professor Tom's plans. His plans very, very precise, and so by piecing them all together, you can see how this thing fits over the land. This is a photograph of the Kerlescan plateau with the alignments here. There's a perfect north-south line of stones to start off with. And then the stones go off towards the east. This is winter solstice, so the sun is really way out of line. But if you come again at equinox, then the sun rises at the east and rises along the lines of the Kerlescan stones. This was taken from a kite, this photograph. Yeah. This is part of the Le Petit Menec alignments. These are ones that are open all year round, and so no upkeep whatsoever. They're totally abandoned. It's really quite strange to see how at Carnac there are sort of important monuments which are closed off with fences, and other monuments just nearby which nobody seems to care about. It's rather weird. There are sort of first-rate, first-class monuments, and then second-class or third-class monuments. So let's get back now to the Menec West and to Kermario. This satellite photo shows the whole of the Menec West and East, and the beginning of the Kermario alignments here. Now, these sections have always been seen as separate. Even today, there is absolutely no information about the fact that there could be a link between these parts. I'm going to show you that it's perfectly clear that these alignments are linked together. And it's perfectly clear for the following reason, is that if you take the first line, the most southerly line at the beginning of the Menec alignments, and you trace it along the line of stones, so along the alignment of these stones, if you extend it, it heads straight for the dolmen here at the beginning of the Kermario alignments. Now, if you take the second line, so this is the second line of stones, that hits exactly the first stone of the first row of the Kermario alignments. Now, I said there were 10 rows here and 11 rows here. And in fact, what we're going to see is that each row from the Menec alignments lines up with the opposite row, apart from the first row, and that lines up with the dolmen. So if I continue, you can see that every line links up. Right. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this. I'll go onto Google Earth and show you exactly how this works. But what's quite astounding is that's obvious, but nobody has actually mentioned it. Nobody talks about it. And these things are seen as totally separate. So what's very interesting is the angle of this line, because here we've got quite some distance, nearly 1.5 kilometers here. And what I discovered, this was my first sort of major discovery after about 18 years of working on this. So I've been a bit slow. But the first discovery was this, is that the axis of these Menec West alignments is exactly aligned along the diagonal of a triple square, which is perfectly orientated towards cardinal directions. So this line here is north-south, perfectly north-south. This is perfectly east-west. And if I take this line from the first stone of the second row to the first stone of the first row here, I've got the exact angle, exact to 1/100th of a degree of the angle of the diagonal of a triple square. So I'll show you that, just show you that geometry, the diagonal of a triple square. So if you take 3 squares and put them side by side, then if you trace the diagonal of that, the angle formed by the diagonal with the base is 18.435 degrees. If you take that angle from the north, then you have to take 90 degrees minus that, which gives you an angle from north of 71.565 degrees. Okay? So now I'm going to go on Google Earth. We can see these stones. And Google Earth is going to allow us, right, let's put this up here. So if I zoom in, I've taken a photograph dating, satellite images dating from 2012 because it's winter and there are no leaves on the trees, and so you can see the stones better. The other photographs taken in summer, part of the stones are hidden. So if I zoom in here, you see these trees. This is the beginning of the Carnac alignments here. And we can see the first row of stones behind these trees here. Okay? Now, if I take my ruler, okay, and I put right on the top of this first stone of the first line, so this is the cornerstone here, I put a point, and then we'll zoom out along these alignments and go right up to the dolmen here, the chamber of the dolmen. Now, this dolmen, the corridor is this way, and the chamber is here. Okay, so if I put this, I'll zoom in a bit more so we can see it. So if I put this in the middle of the chamber, look at this angle, 71.56 degrees, up here there. That's the exact angle from that first stone to the chamber of this dolmen. 71.56 degrees is the exact angle. of the triple square. And if you look at the distance, you'll see it says 1429. I've gone a bit too far. It could read 1428.57. If I go to the center of the chamber, I have 1,428.57 meters. That is 10,000 meters divided by 7. Now that might sound very strange. What's he doing talking about meters here? But you'll see during this talk that what I'm going to show you and prove to you quite without any doubt is that the meter length was known to these people and they used it. This was their major measurement. And I'll also show to you how it was used in Egypt. The meter measurement was introduced by Napoleon after he'd been to Egypt. There was an Egypt campaign by Napoleon. 35,000 troops moved into Egypt after the French Revolution. And they started cleaning the sand off the base of the Great Pyramid. Now, you might think after a revolution they had better things to do. But this seems to be very important for them. And in fact, when Napoleon, he left before the rest of the others, he came back on his own by a boat. And when he arrived back in Paris, the meter length was announced. But I'll be going into this, and I'll be able to show you, to prove to you quite clearly, that the meter length was used here in Carnac. Well, you've got a definite example of this here, and also in Egypt. Now let's do the second line, just to make sure this isn't a coincidence. So I'll go down now to show you the second row. Let's get down to the second row. You can see here the second row. I'll zoom into this stone here. And now we'll move up to the first stone of this row here. Okay? Voilà, 71.57 degrees. It's exactly the same angle. The angle of the triple square was 71.565. Okay? So we have this exact angle over 1,400 meters, which is very important. I could also show you in the center of the alignments here, you have a big flat stone which was placed in the center. People here call it the sacrifice stone, but I call it the table stone. Now, if I put a point on that, and I come back to the table stone in the Menec alignments here, which you can see right in the middle here again. Oh, didn't take. Look at that, 1,428.57 meters. Between those two stones, that's again exactly 10,000 meters divided by 7. If you multiply 1,428.57 by 7, it makes 10,000. Okay. So that's a very strong introduction. Well, here I show you this on an image, right? This is the measurement and the distance we've just seen on Google Earth. And this is the triple square, again shown along the second row here of the alignments. If I draw the diagonal, you can see how the stones go exactly along the diagonal. So it's not just the link to Kermario, which is exactly on the triple square, the diagonal of the triple square, it's also the lines of stones themselves. Professor Tom actually took a theodolite and worked out the exact angles of all these stones, all these lines, although he didn't know it was linked to Kermario, so he didn't go that far. But his average angle for the whole of those stones was exactly 18.435 degrees north of east. So he didn't actually connect that with the triple square, but he did in fact get the exact angle from measurements on the ground.